The aliens questioned. The Galactic Council chamber was silent. Dozens of species filled the massive room, each seated in their carved stone or metal thrones, watching the center with curious eyes. At the very center stood a human, tall and calm, wearing the plain uniform of the Terran fleet. His name was Commander Elias Kane, chosen to represent humanity before the galaxy. It was supposed to be a formal introduction, polite and ceremonial. Nothing more. But aliens were never predictable, especially the Ephral, a strange insectoid race with forearms, shimmering scales, and a habit of asking questions without understanding how blunt they sounded. Ambassador Ziln of the Ephral tilted his sharp head, his antennae twitching as he studied Kane. His voice clicked through the translator with a high buzzing tone. "Human," he said. "What is this hard thing hanging between your legs? May I touch it?" The chamber erupted in noise. Some aliens gasped. Others laughed. Some chattered nervously. Kane froze, his face turning pale, and then red. He glanced around, trying to understand if this was some kind of insult or just ignorance. The council speaker, a massive reptilian called Soren, pounded his claw on the dais for silence. "Ambassador Ziln," Soren growled. "Explain yourself." Ziln seemed confused by the reaction. His eyes clicked open wider, and his antennae flared. "I only wish to study," the alien said. "It is unusual, strange, and like our own forms, I have seen humans carry devices and tools. But this is natural. It is attached to the body. I do not understand. I wish to learn." Commander Kane took a deep breath. He realized then that the ambassador was not being rude, at least not on purpose. The Ephral simply had no concept of human clothing, or the way humans wore belts, holsters, and equipment round their waist, attached to Kane's leg. Hidden partly by his uniform was a hardened holster carrying a sidearm, a Terran plasma pistol. To the Ephral, it must have looked like part of his body, fused and strange. "It is not part of me," Kane finally said, steady but firm. His voice echoed in the chamber, translated into dozens of alien tongues. "This is a weapon, a tool made by humans, not flesh, not bone. It is something we build." The aliens murmured, whispers moving like waves across the chamber. "A weapon," they repeated. Humans carried weapons into the council, into the very heart of galactic diplomacy. Some were outraged. Others were impressed, and more than a few were curious. Kin stood straighter, his eyes calm, his hand resting near the weapon as if daring anyone to challenge him. The tension grew heavier, like a storm waiting to break. Ambassador Ziln's antennae quivered. "Our weapon," he said, his voice full of wonder rather than fear. "You mean you grow stronger not through your body, but through the things you create. You fuse your weakness with machines. You make hardness where there's none." He leaned closer, fascinated. "May I study it? May I touch it, to understand how it binds to you?" King shook his head slowly. "This is not for play," he said, his voice low. "It is not for curiosity. It is for survival. It is for war." The words dropped into the chamber like stones into deep water. For a moment, every alien in the chamber fell silent, listening to the weight behind them. The council speaker's eyes narrowed. "Human," Soren said carefully. "Do you mean that your people carry such things, always, even in peace?" Kane met his gaze without fear. "Yes," he answered, "because, for us, peace is never certain. Peace is only the silence before war, and in that silence we prepare." The words shook the chamber more than any weapon could. Some species hissed in disapproval, calling humans paranoid, dangerous, too violent to join the council. Others whispered with respect, admiring the honesty, the blunt truth of a species that did not hide behind soft words. Ambassador Ziln tilted his head again, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "Perhaps this is why your kind is feared," he said, "because you turn weakness into strength, and strength into fire." Kane did not answer. He only stood silent. But inside, he felt the tension in the room shift. The question had been foolish, maybe even insulting, but it had also become a spark. Now every alien present stared at humanity not as a curiosity, but as a mystery, a force they could not fully measure. And in that silence, Kane knew the hook had been set. The story of humans in the council was only beginning. Whispers in the council chamber did not return to calm. Even after the speaker tried to move to the next agenda, the air was thick with unease. The human had said too much, had shown too much, and every species present carried away their own interpretation. For some, it was fear; for others, curiosity; and for a few, it was admiration. But all agreed on one thing: humanity was not simple, and that made them dangerous. When the session ended, ambassadors withdrew into their private halls. The council was never about unity. It was about alliances whispered in shadows. The insectoid Ephraim gathered with the crystalline Isiri, the skilled Dracon, and the cunning Xylarus. Each spoke in hushed tones, their translators working to entangle their languages into a single stream. "Did you hear the human?" Ziln hissed, his antennae twitching. "They carry weapons into peace. What kind of species does that?" The Isiri's crystalline body hummed with light. "They are fragile," she replied, her voice like glass breaking. "Their bodies are weak, soft, but their minds are sharp, sharper than blades. If they carry weapons, it is because they know they cannot rely on their flesh." The Dracon commander rumbled a growl. "To carry a weapon into the council is not weakness," he said, his golden eyes flashing. "It is defiance. It is strength. It is a message. We do not bow, not even here." He leaned forward, his voice low. "Perhaps the humans are more like us than they admit." The Xylarus envoy hissed in irritation. "You all see shadows where there are none. They are a young race, barely centuries beyond their home world. They use tools like children use sticks. They will burn themselves before they burn us." But even as he spoke, he shifted nervously, because the truth lingered like smoke. The Terran had not spoken with pride, not with arrogance. He had spoken with calm certainty, as if war and fire were not choices, but inevitabilities, and that kind of certainty was more dangerous than rage. Meanwhile, Commander Kane walked the long metal corridors of the council station. His escort of security drones hummed silently, their lens as glowing red. Round him, alien citizens whispered, their eyes following his every step. He had become as simple in one day, the human who brought a weapon into the heart of peace, the human who spoke of survival as if it was a prayer. In his quarters, Kane opened a private channel. The holographic face of Admiral Reyes appeared, sharp and stern. "You've stirred the hive," Reyes said without preamble. "The council is buzzing. Half of them want you expelled. The other half want to test us. And if you want to ally with us," Kane sighed, rubbing his temples. "I only told the truth," he said. "They asked," I answered. "If they cannot handle honesty, they should not have asked the question." Reyes narrowed his eyes. "Truth is a weapon sharper than plasma, Commander. And you just fired it in every direction." He leaned closer, his voice lower. "Do not forget, humanity has survived because we carry the weight of our past. We cannot afford to look weak, but we also cannot afford to look reckless." Kane nodded, though his gut told him the decision was no longer in his hands. The story had already escaped. Carry on whispers, spreading across the council faster than any fleet. In the lower decks of the station, merchants and smugglers spoke of the human. "He carries part of himself made of iron," one said, exaggerating. "No," another argued. "He grows weapons from his flesh. They are born with blades." The truth twisted, bent, reshaped. By the time the tale reached the far edges of the galaxy, it would no longer be a story of a pistol on a belt. It would be a story of humans whose bodies were half machine, half fury, unstoppable and unbroken. And the aliens who listened began to wonder, if one human could walk into the council and shake its halls, what would an army of humans do if unleashed? Back in the council's high chamber, debates grew fierce. The speaker slammed his claw for silence, but the voices of 100 races clashed like storms. The humans are reckless, one ambassador cried. They will drag us all into war. They are survivors. Another countered. Their strength could be useful. Imagine them as allies. They are unpredictable, hissed a third. And unpredictability is more dangerous than any weapon. Ambassador Ziln rose again, his antennae trembling with urgency. I asked a question out of ignorance, he admitted, but the answer I received has opened my eyes. We all thought of humans as fragile. But they are not. There's something else entirely. He paused, his voice sharp as crystal. They turn weakness into strength, fear into fire. If we push them, they will not break. They will burn. The chamber fell silent at his words, because every species in that room had seen fire, had feared it, had been scarred by it, and now, for the first time, they looked at humanity not as prey or pawn, but as fire itself, waiting to spread. Commander Kane stood outside the chamber as the debates raged. Through the metal walls, he could hear the echoes. The fear, the respect, the confusion, and for a brief moment, he allowed himself a small smile, not because he wanted fear, not because he wanted power, but because he knew the truth had taken root. The galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. The Revelation Council chamber was called again the next cycle. The speaker's voice boomed across the hall, commanding all representatives to gather. The alien thrones filled once more, glowing, humming, shifting with the colors of so many species, and at the center, once again, stood Commander Elias Kane of Earth, his shoulders straight, his eyes calm, his weapon still resting at his side like a shadow that never left him. The debate began at once. Some voices thundered with anger. The humans are reckless, shouted the envoy of the Kurith, their tendrils writhing. They carry weapons into peace. They cannot be trusted. Others spoke with admiration. They have survived wars none of us could, said the scaled Dracon commander, his voice rumbling. They may be the allies we need. Still others wavered, unsure, whispering of danger and hope alike. The speaker finally turned his great reptilian eyes to Kane. Human, he said, his voice slow and heavy. The council demands truth. Tell us why your kind arms itself even in peace. Tell us why you walk into diplomacy with fire at your side. Kane's voice was steady. Because peace is fragile, he said. Because history is sharp. Because survival does not wait for permission. He let the silence linger, the weight of his words carrying into every translation. My people do not seek war. But we have faced extinction more times than we can count. When the sky burned, we endured. When the oceans rose, we adapted. When enemies came with fire, we fought. Always we survived. And survival has shaped us into what we are, the council murmured, some nodding, others whispering in alarm. Kane's eyes swept across them, and his voice grew firmer. You ask what this hard thing is between my legs, you ask what till I carry. But the truth is, it is not the weapon you should fear. It is the hand that built it. It is the will that forged it. It is the spirit that carries it. He paused, his gaze sharp, because humanity carries fire not in its machines, but in its hearts. And no empire, no council, no armada has ever been able to put that fire out. The chamber grew still. Even Ambassador Ziln, who had first asked the awkward question, lowered his antennae in thought. The series' crystalline body dimmed, a sign of deep contemplation. The Dracon commander grunted low, as if in respect, and the speaker's eyes narrowed, studying Kane as though searching for cracks. Finally, Ziln rose again, his voice thin but firm. Then this is the truth of your kind, he said. Not flesh, not machine, but the ability to turn every weakness into strength, every scar into a weapon, every question into a warning. He tilted his head, mandibles clicking softly. It seems I asked a foolish question. But the answer is a revelation. The hall stood again, because now the whispers had turned into something more solid. Not just curiosity, not just fear, but understanding. and understanding that humanity was not a race to be mocked or dismissed. It was a force that endured, a flame that adapted, a species that did not die easily. In the shadows of the chamber, some ambassadors already plotted. The zealous, ever cunning, whispered of alliances. The Curith, though fearful, whispered of preemptive strikes. The Dracons spoke of respect, perhaps even friendship. But above all, they all whispered of one thing: humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. Kane left the chamber when it was done. The doors hissed closed behind him, shutting away the voices, the debates, the chaos. He walked the long metal corridor in silence, his boots echoing, his shadow stretching. Aliens stepped aside as he passed, not out of fear of his weapon, but out of something deeper, out of the realization that humanity carried something no one else could. Back on his ship, Kin sent his final report to Admiral Rios. He spoke simply: "First contact with the Council complete. They now know who we are. They now understand. The galaxy will whisper about humans, and some will fear, some will respect, but all will remember." The message ended with a single line: "Humanity is fire, and fire spreads across the stars." The story traveled faster than any fleet, on merchant ships, in pirate dens, in rebel camps, in royal courts. The tale was riddled. The human with the strange hard thing, the human who carried fire, the human who warned without raising his voice. Every telling made it greater, every whisper turned it into legend. And soon the phrase was born: "Do not test the humans, for they will turn weakness into fire, and fire into survival." In the years that followed, whenever a human ship entered a system, eyes turned. Whenever a human ambassador walked into a chamber, silence fell. Whenever a human weapon gleamed at a soldier's side, whispers rose again, not of the tool itself, but of the will behind it, the will that said humans might be fragile. But they were never broken. And so the question that had once made the council laugh, "What is this hard thing hanging between your legs?" became instead a phrase of warning, a reminder, a symbol of humanity's truth, that the galaxy could misunderstand their bodies, their tools, their ways, but they would never misunderstand their spirit. For that spirit was harder than iron, sharper than blades, fiercer than fire, and it was a spirit that no empire could ever truly conquer.